New Year, everyone, and welcome to Your Health in Your Hands. I'm Dr. David Ajibade with the Brain and Body Foundation. Now, if I were to ask you what is the most important system in the body, what would you say? You'd probably say the brain or the nervous system. And I would say, yes, you're right. But this being a new year where we have all these New Year resolutions and we're prioritizing our efforts in different parts of life, including health, I would ask you, what would be the most important system to take care of? And to answer that question, you would say, well, maybe it's the lungs, because obviously oxygen is super important, the most important substance our body needs. So without oxygen, we're dead. Every part of the body is dead, right? But do we really need to pay that much attention to our lungs? Usually if there's a problem, we kind of find out about it very, very, very quickly, right? So it's not like something that's going to happen to us right away. It's not something that we're going to miss. You have a problem breathing, you have a problem breathing. Obviously, there are more extreme cases like pneumonia and, of course, COVID-19. We'll get into that in some time. But for the most part, we take our breathing for granted. So what's the other option? I would say the most important system you should pay careful attention to is, drum roll, the cardiovascular system. In other words, the heart and the blood vessels. And you can see the image that there in front of you. The cardiovascular system is especially important for everybody, but especially important for we Blacks, because we tend to have problems with the cardiovascular system more than the whites, the other races do. And we've discussed some of these in our talk, our episode called Why Blacks Die First. So we're not going to go into too much of that now. We're going to be focusing on the cardiovascular system. The question now is why? Well, obviously, it's the blood. The life of the body, the life of the flesh is in the blood, right? So it's the blood that takes oxygen from the lungs to the brain, to the heart, to the other parts of the body where they need it. So oxygen, without the cardiovascular system, even if the lungs are working perfectly, the oxygen gets into the lungs, but it doesn't go anywhere from there. So you know that you're not going to do much, you're not going to have much progress if you don't deal that. All right, so obviously is the cardiovascular system, because without the blood, the heart pumping and the blood vessels, the arteries and veins, taking blood with oxygen from the lungs to the brain, to the heart, to the kidneys, wherever, you would be dead. So the cardiovascular system is important in that regard. A quick one thing I want to point to, remember when we talked about how if there's a problem with the lungs, you will know very quickly? Well, you don't know as quickly with the heart. That's why sometimes hypertension or other conditions like hypertension and diabetes are called the silent killers, because you really don't know how it's affecting your body until it's really too late. So it's super important that you pay special care and attention to your cardiovascular system. I'm going to run through a few other things. Nutrients, glucose, proteins, fatty acids, amino acids, and so on and so forth, antioxidants. They cannot get to the parts of the body where they need them, including the immune system, if the cardiovascular system is not working. So it's very important. The third reason why the cardiovascular system is so important is because you also have to get rid of waste products. Your body, when it's doing its regular activities of the day, it produces carbon dioxide and other waste products from the nutrients that it burns. These need to be taken out of the body, either through the lungs, to the gut, through the kidneys, and through the skin. They have to be removed. If they are not removed, then they tend to accumulate in the body. And of course, you know what happens when things accumulate. Things that are bad accumulate. They tend to cause problems. So those are the three main things. Now, there are other things as well, but those are the primary reasons why the cardiovascular system has to be paid attention to: the oxygen, the nutrients, and the removal of toxins. So we're going to go into a bit more detail into why the cardiovascular system is so important and what you can do to, as we say, build strength in your cardiovascular system so you won't fall prey to some of these conditions that affect so many of us, Black people in particular. So we're going to take a short break and we will be right back.
At the Brain and Body Foundation, our end game with sickle cell disease is to reduce the death rate of children below the age of 5 living with sickle cell disease from 75% to less than 10% by 2025.
All right, welcome back. We're talking about the cardiovascular system, the heart and the blood vessels, and why that's so important for your health and why you must make it a priority in this 2023. You absolutely must pay attention to your heart and blood vessels. A quick detour, I was just thinking about Sonny Okoso, the musician, the Christian musician who died recently at the age of 51. 51, I mean, that's really unfortunate. But they have not, I don't think they've said for exactly what killed him, but it couldn't be anything worse. It couldn't be anything other than either a heart attack or a stroke. That's what usually happens. And we know that a few years before maybe a year or two before he died, he was going through a lot of stress. There were issues, there was a scandal with him, and I think there was an affair that he was really sad about. And it caused a lot of problems. So part of it was the stress he went through. He may not have been taking care of his cardiovascular health like he should. He may have had blood pressure even before the incident. He may have been dealing with diabetes. He may have been dealing with other issues which were not caught during his regular checkup. I hope he was doing regular checkups. But this underscores the importance. People should not be dying at the age of 50 or 51 or even 60, in my opinion. Their bodies are still really still have a lot of reserves. So it's again, it's unfortunate. So again, this underscores the importance of us taking care of our heart and blood vessels. You cannot just leave it to your doctor, your cardiologist, even if you travel abroad. We have found out that even people who have had extensive tests, I know of someone in particular who had a clean bill of health. The next, I think, week or so, he came up with a massive heart attack because they can't really find everything. They can't highlight everything. It's good to check, but it's not always you find all the problems. And so it's important in the final analysis, it's important for you as a person to understand the principles, the guiding principles, the general fundamental things that affect your blood vessels and your heart, so that you can take the necessary actions and the necessary precautions to ensure that your blood vessels are healthy. It's not just about the numbers. It's not just about having a good blood pressure reading. It's not just about having good sugar readings or good cholesterol readings. It goes beyond that, and I'm hoping we can talk about that some more. In front of you is a picture of the main causes of death worldwide. And you can see that the cardiovascular system, cardiovascular diseases like heart and circulatory, it says heart and circulatory disorders. I would add strokes to that. Those are the top killers worldwide. It's beginning to go on the rise, but in general, most countries, especially in the Western world, the number one cause of death is cardiovascular. So heart attacks and strokes. Number two is cancer. Number three are the lung problems, respiratory problems, especially as you grow older. Actually, in the extremes of life, when you're very young and when you're very old, you're more susceptible to respiratory problems. And then, of course, number four, the nervous system problems, like the brain. Problems with the brain. They are on the rise, folks. I'm shocked. I mean, dementia, we used to think about dementia, and that's a problem when you're losing your memory and you're losing your ability to speech. I used to think that was for the very, very old and the decrepit. It's not so anymore. We're seeing people even younger than 60 that are having dementia. Anyway, I'm saying all this to say this again, that even though cardiovascular system is the number one cause, it also affects number two, number three, number four, number five, number six, and it goes on from throughout. It goes on as far as you can see. Because if your blood flow, if your cells are not receiving oxygen, let's use cancer, for example. One of the things we know is that what causes a cancer cell to eventually change is in cases in which they're not having enough oxygen. One of the things, if all your cells in your body are having the amount of oxygen that they needed to function at every point in time, it's less likely that they become inflamed and less likely they become cancerous. Same thing with the brain. We're seeing now, I'm talking about dementia, we're seeing that even though some people have amyloid plaques, they don't necessarily have dementia. It's those who have the plaques and the tangles and the other problems in the brain, plus problems with their blood vessels in the brain. In other words, the arteries are not able to provide the oxygen and the nutrients to the brain cells because the arteries themselves, those channels are diseased themselves. And that's why they're not providing enough of the nutrients and the oxygen, like I said, to the brain. Those are the people that are more likely to have cognitive problems. They are more likely to have dementia and cognitive disease, and obviously stroke as well. So I'm just trying to say all this to emphasize that the underlying factor in many other diseases includes a failure to some degree of the cardiovascular system. Another reason why we need to focus on the cardiovascular system. And before we move on to how to focus on the cardiovascular system, I also want to talk about COVID-19, because these days you can't ever say you can't discuss any disease without talking about COVID-19 because it is so pervasive, it influences so many things. So that no matter what you throw at it, you'll be able to bounce back. You won't fall beyond repair. You'll be able to come back, you'll be able to put the tools that we are talking about in motion so that your cardiovascular system will be healthy. So give us a few minutes and we will be right back.
These are the 4 areas that we believe must be addressed in the management of sickle cell disease. They are decreased immune function, overproduction of free radicals, excessive inflammation, and nitric oxide deficiency, which affects blood flow. At the Brain and Body Foundation, under the supervision of the Federal Ministry of Health, we have been able to show conclusively that by addressing one or more of these areas, children can live more improved lives.
Welcome back. We are talking about how to ensure that your cardiovascular system, your heart and your blood vessels are healthy. Remember, your doctor will treat a disease if they can find one. If they can't find anything, they don't tell you to go home and just take care of yourself. Eat a balanced diet, exercise, and so on and so forth. Those general suggestions and rules for living that everybody knows about, but almost nobody does, right? So I want to go into the specifics, those really the nitty-gritty, so that you can know exactly what you need to do. And before I say that, I want to point out the most important thing. Remember, we're talking about priorities. This is the first week of the year 2023. So we want to look at the most important things. When it comes to your cardiovascular system, the most important thing is what is known as the endothelium, which is the lining of the blood vessels. The lining, and there's a picture of that in front of you, the endothelium. That lining has to be smooth and healthy. If it's not, if it's inflamed, if it's affected by anything from cholesterol to inflammatory particles, I mean, I don't want to go into all that, but there are things that make the lining of the blood vessels less smooth and less healthy. And once they become rough, once that lining becomes rough, it acts as a magnet for calcium, for deposits like cholesterol, bad cholesterol to stick there and cause the platelets and the other blood vessels and the other parts of the blood to stick there, and therefore begins to cause an accumulation, which eventually results in plaque. So the bottom line is that you want to ensure that your blood vessels are clean and healthy. To do that, it's not just about nutrients. I know you hear me talk about nutrients a lot. No, it's not just about nutrients. It's about the whole being and outlook of the human being. In other words, we talk about the laws of life, the laws, the principles, the rules that govern human life, the fundamental rules that govern human life. And we go through them. I'm not going to go into them right now. We've done a few episodes on that. But I want to highlight a few things. Stress, which is the law 3, which affects law 3, which is your thoughts and emotions. Stress can have a very, very damaging effect on the lining of the blood vessels. Other things can do that as well. Not being active, sitting down on your couch all day long watching TV, or sitting down at your desk working all day without standing up and walking around can cause damage to the blood vessels. Another thing, your dental health, your teeth. If your teeth are not healthy, if you're having infections around the gums, infections in the gums or around the teeth, periodontitis, that they are finding out can cause is a huge risk factor for cardiovascular disease because it causes inflammation. I'm not going to go into that, probably in another discussion. If your gut is unhealthy, if you're putting in all kinds of wrong food, it can also cause a problem for your blood vessels. If you're taking in a lot of sugar, a lot of sugary products, if you're taking a lot of starchy stuff, pounded yam, eba, those things convert to sugar really, really quickly. You're taking all that, is going to increase your chances of having damage to the blood vessels. And by the way, the number one cause of kidney damage or kidney failure or kidney disease is hypertension. The number two cause of kidney damage, kidney disease, or need for a kidney or renal transplant or dialysis is diabetes. So you don't want to fool around with that. If you're eating pounded yam 3 times a day, if you're an Ekiti person or from Benue State, you want to reduce it down to like less than like once a day and much smaller portions. Again, these things damage the blood vessels. Of course, the Fulanis too tend to have higher rates of diabetes. So you also want to, from what we know, there's a lot of sweet stuff that is taken in the Fulani tribe, which they are seeing is pointing more and more towards diabetes. All right, having said that, I just wanted to highlight a few things in the 7 laws. The foods that we eat, our attitudes, our levels of activity all affect our blood vessels. Now let's go into the specifics. Again, it's all about the lining of the blood vessels. What makes it healthy? Number one, before we do anything else, you want to ensure that your blood pressure and your blood sugar is normal. You can't get around that. That is an absolute vital thing. You must ensure that your blood pressure is not above 120 over 80. You take your medications. I cannot emphasize that enough. Take your medications, take your blood sugar. Your blood sugar, for if you are diabetic or pre-diabetic, make sure you're taking the blood sugar medications. I think I've talked about it before. When after a while, I was on some blood pressure medications myself. I decided, okay, this is causing problems for me. I'm not playing squash. I'm not able to run like I should because it was causing my knees to be stiff. I researched, I found out a few other supplements I could use, and they used them for a while, and my blood pressure was maintained. Remember, I kept on emphasizing, you have to check your blood pressure all the time. They don't work all the time. And eventually, I had a very stressful time. We were getting a shipment from abroad, and it was a lot of money. It was worth a lot of money, and we had to make sure that it came out of the ports before the end of the year. And it was very stressful for me. All kinds of things were going on. I'm not going to go into it, but it was very stressful for me. So even with what I was taking, the supplements I was taking, it wasn't kicking my blood pressure normal. So I had to go back on my blood pressure medications. There's nothing to be proud or ashamed about. I had to go back on it. And I'm saying this now to you again, that you've got to make sure your blood pressure levels are normal, no matter what you do. You can buy these blood pressure readings. I think they're cheaper and cheaper now, so you should be able to get a good one for probably 5,000 or 10,000 there. I strongly just suggest that you get something like that. If you can't go to the pharmacy or go to the hospital, make sure that you check your blood pressure regularly. That said, here are the top nutrients that I feel that you should have. Number one, vitamin D3. Remember, we talk about this all the time. It's only become more important as we go along, especially with COVID-19. Vitamin D3 helps to relax your blood vessels. It also helps addresses inflammation. It also helps to boost nitric oxide. This is a very important chemical that your blood vessel needs, or your heart and blood vessels needs to be able to relax and let blood flow through. You also need vitamin C. I don't know why there is such a huge backlash against vitamin C. But vitamin C is important for collagen. It's also important for the immune system. It's also important for the lining of the blood vessels. It helps a lot. You should be taking, in my opinion, I take at least 1 gram a day. And what I do is I take the powder, so I put it in a glass of water and I drink it. Or when I'm going to play squash, I drink it every time I come out for a break. So it's not like you're giving it all at once, but you're taking it over a period of time. I think part of the problem is that people just take the pills and they don't spread it over time. And so it just comes into the body and the body gets rid of a lot of it in the urine. All right, let's move on. Number 4, I would say, is potassium. Now, potassium is one of those key nutrients that nobody ever talks about. And I have to tell you, I was shocked myself. Graduated in medical school in 1997. It wasn't until a year or 2 years ago when I really began to understand the importance of potassium, not just for the cardiovascular system, but for the brain as well. Potassium, and we probably have to do a separate episode on that. But potassium is important for the health of not just the lining of the blood vessels, but the muscles and just keeping the blood vessels healthy. If you don't have enough potassium in your blood vessels will not be healthy. So you need ample amounts of potassium. Now, what is shocking is that when I look at the different supplements and the different concoctions that are out there, and I see that the level of potassium is like 100 milligrams at most, they are finding out that you need at least 4,000. Let's say for women is about 3,500, 3,500. Men is about 4,700. Think about that. Milligrams a day. Most supplements only have 100 milligrams. The recommendation now is, scientific recommendation now is you need at least, I'm just going to round it up to 4,000 milligrams a day. So compare 100 and 4,000. I mean, it's not even comparable. So this is one of the things that make you see why people eventually have disease, because the basic needs, the basic nutritional needs that make the body function like it should, simply aren't being supplied. The next one is magnesium. Magnesium also helps to relax the blood vessels. It does a lot of other things, but it also helps to relax the blood vessels and allows blood to flow through. It also addresses inflammation. Again, we're not getting anywhere near enough magnesium. And the recommendation is about 400 milligrams a day, 300 to 400. We're probably not getting up to 100, even for those who are taking supplements. So you can see that we're in some trouble. Now, when time is almost fully spent, so I also want to talk about nitric oxide. Now, you've heard me talk about it a lot. It's a gas that is produced in the lining of the blood vessels. Nitric oxide diminishes with age. Those who are healthier tend to have more, or if their blood vessels are healthy or the cardiovascular system is healthy, it's because they have more nitric oxide than those who don't. The older you are, the less nitric oxide you have in your system. By the way, Black people tend to have less nitric oxide than white people. One of the reasons is that they don't have enough sun exposure, they don't have enough vitamin D3, and part of their diet, our diet is really not the best. We take too much starchy foods, like I said. So, and a combination of other things, even genetic factors as well, all combined to make sure that we don't have enough nitric oxide. So we recommend at the Brain and Body Foundation, and this is what I've been using for myself for years and years and years, is a combination. We want to try and make it easy for people as much as possible. Make it easy for you to take the supplements that you need. So I've been using this now for almost 20 years. It's a combination. It has all these different things, plus a lot of other things like the vitamin D, like the vitamin B, which I probably should have mentioned, but it's also important for cardiovascular system. Plus, this combination has L-arginine and L-citrulline. These are both amino acids. These are tiny proteins that the body needs to metabolize, to create, to turn into nitric oxide. And that nitric oxide, like I said, is what is extremely important for the blood vessels. So your body needs these things. So just to recap, you need to give your body the nutrients it needs to have a healthy cardiovascular system. You cannot have a healthy cardiovascular system without having a healthy inner lining. The inner lining of the blood vessels is very, very important. The key things: vitamin D, vitamin C, magnesium, potassium. Talk to your doctor about these things. Then in addition, consider taking L-arginine, L-citrulline, which help you boost nitric oxide, which is probably the most important substance your cardiovascular system needs. You can't eat nitric oxide because it's a gas. You can't inhale nitric oxide. That's not good for you. You take the raw materials your body needs to make nitric oxide, and your body will now make the nitric oxide where it needs it, which is in the blood vessels. That, if you do that on a regular basis, in addition to eating healthy, in addition to exercising, in addition to standing up whenever you sit down you've been sitting down for about an hour or so, getting up, in addition to living a harmonious life with your loved ones, not fighting all the time, in addition to taking care of your dental health, because the cardiovascular system, because the dental health, the teeth, bad teeth can cause major problems in your cardiovascular system. If you do it all together, then you have a much, much, much better chance. I know that's a lot, but you're going to have a much, much, much better chance of having a healthy cardiovascular system. So that's the priority I want to share with you today. There are too many people that are dying because they are missing out on these key things that I've discussed with you. You need to focus on your cardiovascular system above every other thing. I know some people are concerned about cancer, some people are concerned about dementia, people are concerned about pneumonia and other things. This is where you must start. You got to start with ensuring you have a healthy cardiovascular system. If you can't play squash like me, or you can't run around and play soccer, you make sure that you schedule a walking time where you can walk for about 30 minutes, 2 to 3 times or even more times a week, where you're exposed to nature, not in the house. The treadmill is great, but if you can come out of the house and exercise, I would really recommend that above everything else, because you're exposing yourself to nature, exposing yourself to the sun, hopefully exposing yourself to the sun's infrared rays, which that's another discussion all on its own. That will all combine to help you have a healthy body, healthy mind. So with that, I'm going to just wrap it up. I'm going to say welcome again to 2023. Wishing you all of God's blessings, all of God's favors, prosperity, peace, and security, especially in these very, very trying times. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week. Bye.